What if the earth had rights? After all, we as humans have rights. The most important right of all, of course, is our right to life. What if the earth had the right to life as well? And I spoke to other lawyers about this, and they said, Polly, you're mad. Of course the earth doesn't have rights. And after all, there's a whole body of environmental law out there. Why not just use that? But I said, well, there's a problem here. All this existing environmental law, it's not working. It can't be working because you just have to look at the Amazon to see that it's not working. We're looking at mass damage and destruction that's escalating every day. Existing law is not stopping that. And I was actually speaking to a large audience a couple of years ago, back in 2009, about earth rights, when someone in the audience said, we need a new language to deal with this mass damage and destruction that's happening of the earth, of our ecosystems. And I thought, you're right. It's like genocide. It's an ecocide. And I thought, my God, it should be a crime. Is that possible? Could we make ecocide a crime? And I realized that, in fact, indeed, not only could we make it a crime, but it is a missing fifth crime against peace.
To coincide with this, Jack's had an idea to create a beautiful art piece.
Well, yes, this is a sort of extension of working with woodblocks myself, printing with woodblocks, and then the idea came up as a way of bringing attention to what I consider to be one of the kind of fundamental necessities for the globe, is that we have we rebuild our organs, as it were. In this case, the tree providing us with oxygen and taking up carbon dioxide. And I felt as though it was necessary to kind of step up and do something very public. This is the fourth side of the piece. All these clad a large container-shaped box. This flags up what she's doing by kind of getting it covered by the local and the national press in this country. They can go, then they've got a story. I think I don't know how it'll be received. We'll see.
And how many people has it taken, do you think, to get this event off the ground?
I would think probably from all the people that, first of all, resourcing the sheets. They're all sheets that have been used and from house clearances, so they have a whole narrative of their own, which is to do with, we spend a third of our life between the sheets, and birth and death and reproduction and fevers and all those sort of things that take place, and they're all embedded in the sheets. So then the sheets were sewn together. We didn't wash out too much. The sheets were all sewn together by a group of women who operate in a sewing club in Stroud, and then one of the people who was there, it transpired, was an ex-marquee maker, so she's been doing all the lacing down the side and a lot of the sewing, and so there's all that side of it. The wood blocks are sawn at a local sawmill, and then what I do with them is I set fire to them and brush them out so we get the grain. So there's that side to it. Those are all supplied locally from trees actually that had been lying around in the wood yard and weren't going to be used for any other commercial purpose, because as you can see from some of the printing, it's very spalted and rotten. Then there's a whole period of time where we dyed them in a bath and hung them up and dye them in the laundrette, which is kind of in the centre of town. and then after that they were stretched out in not just here but in 2 other places and printed. The next thing is to replant, and there are various people who have been planting trees for some time, and some of them have planted millions of trees, and a lot of them have been in countries which have been denuded of their trees, but you know, where the kind of objection levels are, you know, people on the ground, they don't have necessarily any legal representation, and so it's changing people's attitude towards the plant world, and without the plant world we wouldn't be here. The trees are always coming to our aid, and now that the zeitgeist amongst scientists and naturalists is that, you know, there's a whole communication system going on between plants and the whole mycorrhizal network beneath the ground, is that we need to see, we may not be able to understand it, but we need to be able to kind of begin to appreciate that there's a whole ecostructure that, without our interference, is there to enable nature to carry on and provide for us.
Mm-hmm.
Jack, why does the environment matter to you?
I don't think I'd be here if it wasn't for the environment, really.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sort of immersed. Here I am living in the woods. I can't get away from it. It's my bane and my blessing. You know, it's an ongoing kind of struggle to deal with the environment, the process, if you like.
Yeah.
But what it does is it affords you lots of information, and it gives you kind of insight into interdependency.
Yeah.
And also what's happening in the environment. So when it comes to kind of producing this recent body of work with the woodblocks, I'm kind of looking for a language that might be readable by anybody. And the kind of technique, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't matter what your subject matter is with art. If you can make something that resonates on some kind of aesthetic level, some people call it beauty, doesn't matter what you call it, but some aesthetic level, then you've got some dialogue going on, and perhaps in the case of these woodblocks I can come up with a language that people can relate to, even if it just appears to be decorative on the surface. And by using platonic solids, solid geometry, which is again a kind of a way of interpreting our environment, the combination of the two, perhaps I can come up with something which makes us look at trees in such a way that they're no longer wallpaper to our lives. They're an integral part of our survival, and always has been. Every kind of global change, every kind of climate change in the history of the world has always been revived, as far as the humans are concerned, through trees being there first. So they're close relatives, their DNA isn't that different to ours. Well, none of it's very different from each other. I never know what's going to come out of each printing. You know, I mean, I kind of knew what came out of the printing for this particular project because I was making words, but usually it's images, and some of them work, as far as I'm concerned. Some of them don't. That's the case with my life. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. You know, that's probably the same with all trees. Some work, some don't work. You know,
Yeah.
so it's yeah. I don't know how else to put it really.
That was beautifully put.
Okay, so you've managed now, through your experience in The Hague recently, to be able to take to task, if we could put it that way, 3 members of Dutch Shell, yes? Well, 2 members of Dutch Shell and the Environment Minister, yeah? Is that correct?
The Climate Minister. Yeah.
Right. And as I know you've already started the process, do you think that'll take a long time to gather the material?
By opening up a case file, an independent preliminary examination into climate ecocide, what we're doing is we're predominantly relying on existing evidence. So a lot of the back-end evidential research has been undertaken over a period of about 8 years by a number of organisations, Climate Accountability Institute being a really key one here. They brought out a summary report called Smoke and Fumes. That report's very important because it builds on earlier research that was undertaken into the carbon majors. And the carbon majors identified the top companies in the world that are causing the most amount of harm. Statistics change slightly, but the most up-to-date one establishes that 100 companies in the world are generating over 70% of carbon emissions.
Right.
So, and one of those top companies is Shell.
Yeah.
It kind of moves up and down within the top 10 region. So that's why we're looking at Shell in terms of corporate accountability for climate ecocide. But also we were very interested, and we continue to be very interested in state responsibility, the failure of a state to actually stop a corporation that is causing such serious harm. Climate ecocide is, in some senses, it sounds very abstract.
It's a kind of byproduct
Of dangerous industrial activity, if you like, yes, because you're looking at the consequences that arise out of the generation and release of excess carbon emissions. It's less tangible than, say, for instance, genocide. Genocide, you have a whole load of dead bodies on your hands. That's not to negate the seriousness of genocide, but what we're dealing with is very much 21st century crime here, which requires new parameters. So by opening up an investigation, a preliminary examination of Shell's activities, what we want to do is see whether or not it fits within the existing international crime matrix, if you like, whether or not it could be prosecuted as a crime against humanity. We think not. However, we're examining that, and if not, then it doesn't require new crime, that being ecocide crime.
There are laws against pollution, are there not?
Yes, but
to some degree.
They're very limited in remit, and they tend to be what's known as second-tier legislation.
Right.
So it's civil litigation on the whole. So it tends to be that local population that's adversely impacted by immediate source of pollution, water is a very obvious one, then sues the company. It means that the state can bypass its responsibilities. It doesn't have any involvement in the process. Use the individual, use the community, have to sue. And of course, it's the kind of epic David and Goliath story where small community with little access to funding or lawyers tries to take on big transnational corporation who can throw a lot of money on it and allow it to trawl through the courts, the civil courts, for sometimes over a decade. And what little payment there is, if they do succeed, is often too little too late. The consequences are often far more long-term, long-lasting. So that's very unsatisfactory.
Right.
And that's why we say that there's missing international crime here. That, ironically, one of the biggest international crimes of our time, climate ecocide, where we're putting the threat of injury and loss of life to millions, if not billions, of people on the planet as a whole, is just simply not being able to be addressed through existing international criminal laws.